It's Rod Fleming in the Philippines here. And what an interesting time we've been having. Britain has gone down the tubes, it's completely stuffed. Kukir Shawarma has come in to finish what the scumbag Blair, Tony B. Liar, started. And it looks like Britain will be completely destroyed within the next year or so. I did tell you, I did warn you. We're not going to say any more on that. I mean, I'm already an arrestable person as far as those scumbags that pretend to be police in the UK are concerned. So we'll just leave it for the time being. I think I'll do some stuff on my main site, you know. We might go back to that, because technically it's not social media. So anyway, on topics that are more general, we've had a week of incredible floods and storms and you name it, because of a huge typhoon which went through. It actually went through on Monday, but you know, typhoons, they kind of warn that they're coming, and they kind of, you know, they hang around, you know. They don't just go. So yeah, no, we've had enormous amount of flood, and actually right at the moment we are in the middle of what we call a brownout, which is a power cut. So this is like, we had 3 days of solid power cut earlier, and now it's again, but they say it's only a short one while we fix it. And yeah, I mean, the flooding has been incredible, and I sympathise with the people who are trying to fix it. I mean, they were out there on Sunday, and I mean, it was coming down stair rods. You know, it's like, gee bloody whiz. You know, it was worse than Fort William, and that's bad. Anyhow, we're still here. This house doesn't flood, which is really nice, because we're on a bit of a hill. But just down the lane there, across the road, there's a kind of low-lying field, and it was totally underwater, under about 2 feet of water. So, what I really want to talk to you about today is something I can't show you because I don't have any power. So, I'm just going to try and remember it. I got an email, well, you know, a response to a video from somebody who managed to write about 3,000 words. It's excessive, you know, for a comment on a video, but never mind. And because of this excessive wordiness, I suspect that this person's actually an autogynephilic male, you know, a G. So the first thing is that he spends a couple of paragraphs, and they're big paragraphs, going on about homosexuality. He doesn't define homosexuality. There is the traditional way, which I call the Roman model, which has been around for literally millennia, and is global. It's absolutely global. And then there is this new American dinky winky thing that was invented in the 1950s and became popular in the 1970s. And of course, because it's American and American exceptionalism, we all have to do what the Americans do. We all have to think like the Americans, like fuck we do. So let's just describe a couple of these things to start with. The traditional definition of a homosexual was a catamite. And when Klaus Maria Kert-Benny in 1869, when he coined this term homosexual, which actually was in German, he meant catamites. He was talking about catamites. What were catamites? Catamites were exceptionally feminine males, right, who often liked to dress or perform as women, to perform femininity, that is, and who liked to be the receptive sexual partners to men. So that was your homosexual. That was a catamite. Okay, homosexual is a catamite. Now, the other way of defining this, it's actually the same way, it's just expressed slightly differently, is the kind of people that you find here in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in Southern Europe, and actually all over the United States as well, but nobody wants to admit it, which is highly feminine males who want men. So these are the ways that the traditional view has been expressed. And in Asia, this is actually quite specific. And it's the same in the Roman model, but in Asia, it's quite specific, because if you are a man, and this is current across Europe, Southern Europe, really, across Latin America, across the world, across India, Asia, you name it, if you are a man, that means you penetrate. If you penetrate, you're a man. It doesn't matter what you're penetrating. I mean, this should be really obvious. It doesn't matter. As long as you're penetrating, you're the man. If you are penetrated, to quote from Professor Don Kulik, you are a not man. And that's, again, that is a term you'll find all over the Islamic world, all over Latin America. Not so much here because they use local terms, but a not man. A not man is a bakla. You know, it's as simple as that. A not man is a bakla, is a ladyboy, you know, is a waria, is a kadoi, okama, you name it. They all mean the same thing. And the point is, these don't penetrate. Not normally. I mean, you get some who are penetrative, but a lot of these ones who penetrate, they're really commercial ladyboys. It's a career for them. And of course, if it's a career rather than a desire, then they're more likely to say, oh, well, you know, I don't really like the idea of some guy sticking his thing in me, so I'll do that. And of course, there are a lot of Western guys, not really so many Asian ones, but there's lots of Western guys who are closet catamites themselves, or they're autogynephilic. So they do want to be penetrated, and that provides a ready market for sex workers who perform this service. So when people say, oh, I went to a bar on Walking Street and wherever it is, Pattaya, and they all couldn't wait to penetrate, I mean, it's because they figured you out for a homo already. They figured you out. They know that's what you want, so they're offering it for money. That's the Asian and really the global way. If you penetrate, you're a man. If you don't penetrate, if you are receptive, then you are a not man. And this is the sense in which I use the word homosexual. It's a catamite, it's a not man, it's a ladyboy, it's a bakla, waria, gatoi, all of those. Now, unfortunately, and this is partly due to some, well, I have very little time for Alfred Kinsey and his posturing and his fake assessments, but nevertheless, a lot of people did, and so his opinions became very popular. And for him, homosexuality was just something he did. Now, the thing is that there's a kind of truth in that, because there is a thing called situational homosexuality, right? And what that means is, if there's no women handy, you know, men are just going to doof the cutest looking guy in the group. It doesn't make them gay. It doesn't even make the cute guy in the group gay. It's just, well, there's no women, so get him off. It's that simple. There was a really nice little piece in the newspapers a while ago. Somebody McCollum, an Irish girl, she'd been arrested as a drug mule in Peru. You know, she'd been smuggling drugs, and she got thrown into a women's prison. Now, situational homosexuality is absolutely rife in prison, and this was a women's prison. And she said, like, you know, every day, you see 3, 4, maybe more couples at it, you know, and the passion was incredible, but moaning and groaning and screaming, all the rest of it happened all the time. So the simple fact is that when you take the sexual target, the erotic target, or if you like, the external erotic target, away from people, well, you know, they'll just think up another one. And historically, well, you know, this has been, we'll talk about this another time, this has been, you know, stamped out largely by US influence, which is usually toxic, was that men would just secure the sexual services of an adolescent. You know, one who had not yet masculinized it. Usually, no beard, right? Wasn't able to grow a beard, therefore wasn't a man, therefore get him off. And that is absolutely commonplace. That is de rigueur in the Islamosphere. I mean, there's all this nonsense about, oh, they took off top of windows and all the rest of it. What they refer to is sex between 2 adult masculine men. That's taboo. 2 guys with beards, no. But a man and a feminine boy, well, yeah, you know, there's no women. What are you going to do? It's that or a goat. So, what I'm saying is that homosexuality is not what they try to make it out as being in the West. Another problem that's happened in the West, and partly because of Kinsey, is the idea that this is about attraction. Well, okay, if you're a big guy with a beard, you know, and you fancy sex with other big guys with a beard, well, yeah, I could see that. But if you're a big guy with a beard and you fancy sex with, let's make sure they're legal, 16-year-old beardless boys, well, what do you think ladyboys actually are? You know, what do you think they are? They're boys who maintain their neoteny through the use of hormones. Stop themselves becoming masculine so they can still be attractive to those guys. Yeah. There's nothing homosexual about that at all. No, that's just an invention. So why was that invented? And here we come to the one of those nasty nexuses, you know, those things where two really quite unpleasant political movements come together to be 10 times as unpleasant, you know. Unpleasant to the max. And how that works, right? You had, in the 1960s, you had this new, or it really started in the 50s, but became prominent in the 60s. You had this new so-called gay movement, you know, and it was called originally the assimilationists and the accommodationists. And the idea was, we will look like ordinary men. So that was a bit of a problem because ordinary men are not going to go with people who look like ordinary men. You know, this is not about attraction so much, it's about revulsion. There's a very strong revulsion on the part of ordinary guys, heterosexual men if you like, towards masculinity. We don't like it. We don't like masculine men being masculine near us. I mean, we might play football with them, we might play a game of darts, go for a pint. That's different. But getting into bed? No fucking way. That's revulsion, that's not attraction. And of course the mistake that Kinsey made was, and others have made, was to conflate these two. It's not. Mike Bailey has been quite clear, you know, this business of revulsion is not enough understood, but it's quite obvious, you know. I mean, if you see a, you know, like what you might call, you know, a masculine gay, you know, a guy who's homosexual but performing masculinity, and he tries to come on to an ordinary masculine guy, well, he's likely to be rejected, possibly violently. You know, it's not a very wise thing to do. What that meant was that there was this little group of people who were homosexuals. They wanted to be screwed, but they couldn't find anybody to do it for them because all the guys had gone, we're not, because they had said, well, if you do this, then you're homosexual too. And that came from Kinsey. Kinsey specifically said this, that he would not accept that two men having sex together, that only one of them was homosexual. They both had to be. And of course, again, Mike Bailey said later, no, that's not really true, you know. It isn't true. Throughout history, when I've talked about Alexander, we can talk about Julius Caesar, we can talk about Emperor Hadrian. These were very masculine men. Nobody has under any doubt that they were men. They had sexual relationships with other males. They weren't homosexuals. They weren't catamites. It's just that men will screw anything. As long as you are the penetrative partner, none of these cultures have any doubt about this at all. You're a guy. And the other one is the girl, because guess what? She's what you're going in. I mean, this is really so basic, and yet it's American exceptionalism. We're the tiny minority of the world's population, but whatever we think, the world must think too. It's absolute crap. It really is. And it's done enormous amounts of damage. It really has. So the other influence that came along around about 1970 was feminism. Now, feminism is a scourge. It's a curse. It will probably lead to the complete collapse of Western civilization. And probably in your lifetime. Maybe not mine, because I'm old. But probably in yours. Total collapse. It will be gone because of feminism. Why is that? It's because Western society is essentially masculine. It is actually a patriarchy. It's based upon Greco-Roman ideals. And those were of patriarchy. Rome was a patriarchal culture. It was a militaristic culture. Rome had, you know, I've talked about this before, men were all powerful. Men had the literal power of life and death over anyone in their household. They didn't have to explain themselves. If they killed their son, killed a wife, well, you're paterfamilias. That's your right. It doesn't come much more, patriarchal than that. But Western society, although it was much, much more restrained than that, is actually based on Greco-Roman culture. It is. Feminism is completely contrary to that, which means that everything that Western culture is based on must be destroyed for feminism to succeed. So you basically have a choice. What are you going to do? Watch your culture be destroyed or fight feminism? One of the things that the feminists did very early on was to start putting all the men who'd been banging the ladyboys, or let's say the pretty young catamites, and say, well, Kinsey says you're gay too, so you're a homo because you put your thing in there. And the guys went, fuck you, I'm not a homo, don't be so stupid. Nobody gets their thingy in my bum, therefore I'm a man. But the reason that the feminists did this is that women have always, now this goes back long before the beginnings of feminism. This goes right back to ancient Sumer, which I have spent many years studying. When the original Sumerian societies, the culture that was called Ubaid, but never mind, and it was based in a place called Eden, which is the marshy swampland at the mouths of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These were matriarchal cultures. They were based around women and children, right? And yeah, the men went and hunted and did all that guy stuff. But the societies were actually based on women. Now, when civilization came along, when cities came along, that changed. Because men couldn't just be, oh, I'll see you next week, hon. I got two comely youths here. They'll look after my dodger while I'm away. Don't you worry, I'll be back in a week, babe, with loads of game for you to fry up. Right? Well, they couldn't do that anymore because the men were needed in the city. The cities needed men to build it and maintain them. But more than that, cities, all civilizations initially, were built on agriculture, on industrial scale agriculture. Now, who do you think was out there working the fields? They didn't have any John Brown tractors. Sorry, David Brown. They didn't have any of those. They had to do it all by hand. They had oxen, yes, but most of the work in the fields was done by men with hand tools. So you need this and also, by the way, the Sumerians, right at the beginning of their culture, I mean, we're talking 5,000 years ago, more, they dug canals between the Tigris and the Euphrates. You think the women were doing the digging? I don't think so. So, they were amazing structural, amazing civil engineering. I mean, these were big canals and they lined them with sun-dried bricks. They weren't fired, but they were sun-dried. Well, that's made of clay, and clay is really impervious to water. It won't go through. So they had this, they knew what they were doing, but they needed a hell of a man to do it, right? So ever since that time, women have been trying to get men to stop playing at being boys and stay with them and be men instead. So it's very much like, you used to going off on your so-called hunting trips for a week at a time, and I was left here, and when you wanted your hoggins with me, you came back, had a party, fucked me a couple of times, and then off you went again. That had to stop. And ever since that point, women have been trying to make themselves the exclusive, the unique and exclusive providers of sex to men. Women couldn't have that because, this is actually recorded in descriptions of Sparta, which is a very similar society, where Spartan women, on the day that they were married, had all their hair cut off and they started wearing boys' tunics, so that their men were slightly less intimidated about having sex with them. Because the men were used to having sex with boys. Prove me wrong. So ever since then, there has been this drive amongst women, on the part of women, to make sure that men don't have sex anywhere else. that they have total control over the supply of sex, because that's what gives them power. If they have total control over the supply of sex, then they have total control over men, or at least they believe they do. Men have always been very good at getting around that, I have to say, and that has caused immense irritation on the part of women. That's what pornography is all about. That's what sex work is all about. It's like, nah, my wife can go and wet herself, just going up the local brothel here and now and just get myself sorted out there. That completely destroys, so it's very hot in here, we're in a power cut. That completely destroys women's power over men. You know, if your man can just go, I'll get my sex somewhere else then, darling, there's no point in you being in a huff and denying sex. It's like, well, what's the fucking point of that? And it's made worse because women actually need men. I know they say they don't, but they actually do. Because their eggs are inside their bodies. So they have to get a man to go inside them to fertilise their eggs, or there's no kids. And guess what? When in cultures where you see feminism becoming more and more powerful, such as the West today, what's happened to the reproductive rates? It's plummeted. It's dive-bombed. You're looking at reproduction rates now in the West, particularly in middle-class society, under 1.5. You need 2.2 just to maintain the population. It's gone through the floor. Why? Because women aren't. Instead of getting married and having kids when they're 16, when they should, oh no, got to have a career. Oh, got to have a career. Basically, you take an entire generation out of the reproductive process when you do that. And that's what's happened. And that is one of the main reasons why Western society will collapse. Societies cultures which don't have those constraints. Example, Islam, where Islamic men have 5 or 6 kids each, boy kids, paid for by the state, of course. They're just going to outbreed you. That's their stated bloody aim. And they're enabled to do that by feminists, by Western feminists, who've given up being mothers. But before they gave up, it was like, no, we have to have total control over sex. Oh, no, you can't have prostitutes. And you can't have just in magazines. And you can't have porny websites. No. Oh, you can't have boys. No. You get married to one woman and she controls your sexuality from there on. That's what that's all about. And this is where that fascinating, and it really is, it's interesting, you know, you should study it, the fascinating thing called MGTOW comes in. Because MGTOW men say, oh, I don't have anything to do with women. There's nothing new about this. Huge numbers of men, right up until the 19th century, in fact the 20th, had nothing to do with women. Never had anything to do with women. On a permanent basis. I mean, they might have used prostitutes, yes. They might well have made other arrangements in a situational homosexuality context, but they didn't have any contact with women. They were too busy away fighting or, you know, exploring or adventuring or whatever, sailing, you know. What do you think sailors do? They're away at sea for 10 years. What do you think cabin boys are for? You know? What do you think a knight's page was actually meant to do? Huh? And so, in the 20th century, women are like, no, we've got to stop all that. We have to be the sole providers. And the way they worked out, the way they did that, was they said, well, if you have sex with another male, then it doesn't matter whether you're penetrating or not, you're a homo. And of course, all the guys went, fuck you, I'm not doing that. Fuck off. I'm not a homo. I know I'm not a homo. I don't take it in the arse, so fuck you. And what they did was, they went to, guess where? Countries where it was completely acceptable for them to carry on the way they were. And in the original, you know, after World War II, originally it was southern Italy, then it was North Africa, very famous. And in the last 25, 30 years, it's been Southeast Asia. A ladyboy is just a boy who stopped herself from masculinizing. That's all it is. And, you know, they accept the feminine role, or the female role, in fact, in sex. Therefore, they're not men, and they're with men. You know, this person that I was talking to, I'll come do another one on this, thinks that the opposites attract thing is not true. Well, this person is obviously fucking clueless. Opposites obviously do attract, otherwise there would not be a 400 billion a year cosmetics industry providing ways for women to be more feminine so they can attract men. I mean, use your goddamn brains, for fuck's sake. So there you have it. A little bit of what's homosexuality. We'll come back to some of the other points made by this person. But essentially, I don't use the term homosexual hardly at all, except as transsexual homosexual. Right? I use it as a class of people, as catamite. But when I say catamite, you don't know what I mean. But the idea that you can just call a guy finds a cute boy attractive, that makes him gay. It's just bullshit. That's just how gay people, it's a political organisation, a politicised lifestyle, get men to go along with their ideas, assisted by women who are feminists, who are completely happy for men to be denied the opportunity to have sex elsewhere. I mean, they might be right up for, oh, let's shut off the supply of sex to the men. You know, in Rome, I'll just finish with Rome. In Rome, the cult of Isis, it's not ISIS, it's Isis, for God's sake. I think people ought to get yourselves an education. The cult of Isis, right? Otherwise known in Egyptian as Hashat, was followed by many women in Rome. And it wasn't the only one. The cult of Cybele, which what is now Turkey, was also very popular. And these are very powerful female goddesses. And they actually organised sex strikes. And it didn't work. It's absolutely hilarious. They had these sex strikes, they all went out in the street, Isis, no sex for you. And what did the guys do? They just went to the brothel, which is called the bathhouse. And there were towel boys there. What do you think? You think towel boys just hold the towel? You actually are stupid enough to think that. Or they would go and just, I mean, there were thousands of licensed prostitutes, because Octavian, that is Augustus, he made them get licensed. Before that they weren't licensed, they just did it. But he made them get licensed. There were thousands of them in Rome alone. And I was standing on the corner of your street. If your wife said, you're not having sex with me, I'm annoyed with you, you would just go, okay, screw you honey, I'm down the road there. Or if you had slaves, if you had female slaves, you could just fuck them. You were paterfamilias. You could do anything you liked with them. They were slaves. They had no choice in the matter. So these sex strikes organised by these politicised religious groups, which we should be familiar with by now, were a complete disaster. I mean, they're quite often brought up by feminists in the modern world, but that's because most of these feminists haven't got classical education. They don't know what they're talking about. These so-called sex strikes were a complete disaster. Because that's what the guys did. They either banged their slaves, or they went down the road and got a prostitute, or they just went to the bathhouse and got a towel boy. And that's if they didn't already have a wine boy on the staff, being a slave whose job was to serve wine. And certain other things too. So I think we have to start getting to a proper understanding of what homosexual is. A homosexual, right, is a catamite, right? These words are interchangeable. And it has to do with this. This is the catamite, right? This is the man. It's that simple. There's no, it's nice, it's same-sex attraction. No fucking anything to do with same-sex attraction. It's got to do with sticking your willy in bum. Ha! I mean, what is wrong with you people? I think some of it is just that Americans don't like thinking about things like that. That's why they constantly conflate gender and sex. They're totally different things. Well, we don't like saying sex. Mummy said I shouldn't say sex. I said, I'll say gender instead and confuse everybody. Fucking idiots. Anyway, yeah, I mean, when you study this, you get to realise what a bunch of planets US Americans really are. And they're determined to enforce their pranitism on everybody else. I don't think so, do you? Anyway, we're watching the collapse of the West as it's happening now. If you're in the West, my suggestion to you is to get the fuck out while you can. Certainly, where's my Trump hat? I forgot my Trump hat. I've got a Trump hat. Certainly, coming November, vote Trump. At least resist this nonsense for a while. And, you know, there's some hope that Europe is starting to wake up a little bit, but it may be too late. So on that cheerful note, go and bang some ladyboys. Get it out of your system. It's good fun.